Let's listen up.
Hello.
Hi.
This is our group, and we researched and found some stuff, and now we're going to tell you about it. First up, we have our myths category, and this one was mainly our friend James Chun here. And
Oh, it was
Jason.
half and half.
Yeah, it was.
JT
Yeah.
starts.
First up.
Say?
Oh, no, I'm first. All right. So, as you can see, I wrote this long and beautiful summary of Ragnarok. It continues on to the second slide, which also has a long and beautiful summary. But just to give you the short of it, so it starts with a winter called Fimbulwinter that either lasts forever or just 3 seasons long of just winter, no spring, no summer, just winter, winter, winter. And during that time is when all of the humans will die off from starvation or freezing or infighting over the last few resources. Humans are gonna die. And at the end of Fimbulwinter, there will be lots of earthquakes. And anyone who made it out of Fimbulwinter dies in the quakes. And these earthquakes will shake all of the 9 realms. They'll shake the world tree Yggdrasil itself and let loose all of the shackles binding anyone, including Fenrir, the giant wolf, who will eat the moon and the sun. Depending on different interpretations, either it's a different wolf that eats the sun and the moon during winter, or it's Fenrir once he gets out. But these earthquakes will also wake up Jormungandr, the world serpent, who is wrapped around the whole earth, sleeping at the bottom of the sea. They'll both wake up and start making their way towards Vigrid, the final battlefield of the last war that will be fought between the gods and the giants. And so you've got Fenrir, you've got Jormungandr, and then you've got Surtur, the king of the fire giants, and his army of fire giants. They will come out of Muspelheim, the fiery world that's existed since the beginning of time. And they'll go across the rainbow bridge of the Bifrost, and as they go across it, it will burn beneath them, and there will never be another rainbow. And then Loki and an army of the dishonored dead, because Vikings had like Valhalla, where you go if you die in glorious battle, and then there was also Hel, H-E-L, not to be confused with the Christian Hell with 2 L's, which is where you go if you get sick, or you starve, or you have some kind of dishonorable death. So Loki and an army of the dishonorable dead will join up with Hrym and the frost giants on a ship called the Naglfar, which is made out of the fingernails and toenails of people who are buried. So pro tip, if you want to help the gods and stick it to the giants in the final battle, make sure that you trim someone's fingernails before you bury them, because then the Naglfar won't have as much material. Anywho, Loki and Hrym and their armies will get on the Naglfar and they'll sail towards Vigrid. And then Heimdall, the all-seeing god up in Asgard, will see all the armies of the giants making their way towards the final battle, and even though all of the other gods will be asleep at the time, he will blow his mighty horn and shake Asgard and wake them all up for war. And so all the gods, as well as the Einherjar, which is all the people who died and went to Valhalla, they'll get ready to go down to Vigrid and fight it out. Next. This is the next one. So, y'all ever seen the SNL skit where they play what you say every time someone gets shot, and someone else walks in and then the person who just got shot kills that guy? It's kind of like that. So Odin sees Fenrir and he's like, I'm gonna get you. And so he goes and he tries to fight Fenrir, and he Fenrir breaks Odin's spear in one bite and swallows Odin whole in the second bite. Odin is dead. King of the gods, gone. But then his son, Vidar, who has a very special shoe. His left shoe is just a regular shoe, but his right shoe is made out of every leftover scrap material that was ever thrown away when anyone was making a pair of shoes. So if you want to help out the gods, every time you make a pair of shoes, make sure you throw away the scraps so it goes to Vidar's right shoe. Vidar will stomp on Fenris's lower jaw, pinning it to the ground, and rip his upper jaw apart with his hands, killing Fenrir, avenging his father. Thor, the mighty god, will go to battle the world serpent. And they'll fight, and Thor will kill the great evil serpent. And he will take 9 steps away and fall dead to his venom. So the battle continues a lot like this. Enemies fighting and killing each other, both of them dying. And so in the end, it's Loki versus Heimdall, and they fight, and they're both mortally wounded. And so they're laying there on the ground, and Loki is like, I win. And Heimdall, the god who sees all, is like, bitch, nah. You see, Vidar and Vali, Odin might be dead, but his sons Vidar and Vali, they will survive. Thor might be dead, but his sons, Magni and Modi, they will survive. When all of this is done, Balder and Hod, who were dead and in hell, will come back, and they will survive. Even though Surtur, with his giant flaming sword, will burn away all 9 realms, he won't be able to scorch the world tree itself. And deep down in the roots, there are 2 more humans waiting. And once everything that we know is not but ash, the 6 gods and the 2 humans will return and make the new world. And so the truth of Ragnarok is that the end is only the beginning of the next thing.
All right. There's the myth of Sisyphus. Yeah, I mean, it's a very common one, but I just find it a really fascinating concept because we are Sisyphus. So anyways, he was condemned to endless and pointless labor by the gods. He must push a rock up a mountain every day only for it to fall back down to the bottom and wake up and do it again. And he's in the underworld, by the way. But how he got there was even more interesting. And there's like a bunch of different stories, apparently, but if you go to the next slide, I just picked basically the 2 that I thought were the funniest or the coolest. So, yeah, he was a greedy and lustful man who married his niece, and Zeus was not with it. And so first, he chained Death, he chained him down, and so he was trapped and kept, giving money to his town and stuff. He was a king, by the way. And eventually, Death got away from the chains because it's death. You can't escape death. And his first victim was going to be Sisyphus. But before Sisyphus, because he knew he was screwed. You can't mess with fate. That's what it's all about. He told his wife, his niece, I think still, that dispose of my body in a public place. So then when he's in hell, he's in hell and he tells Hades that his wife didn't give him a proper burial. This dude is so fake. And so Hades is like, okay, yeah, you can go back up and do it again. And this is a direct quote from Zeus. I called him on the phone for this, and he said, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, and you push a rock for the rest of your life." So, thank you.
Now we get to some folk tales, which is where things get a little bit more crazy.
The man, the moth, the legend, Mothman.
He likes this one.
So, Mothman was first sighted on November 15th, 1966, just outside of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. So I just want to say, one thing that I think is really nice is just the name Point Pleasant. It's alliterative, it sounds like a nice place, but there's all kinds of crazy, whack, supernatural shit going down. Back to the story. So there were these 2 young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette, who they were, as young people do, they were just hanging out at an abandoned TNT factory trying to find a place to make out, as I'm sure we've all done. Just me? Okay. And on their way back home, they saw him. He was described as being 6 or 7 feet tall, gray, with huge glowing red eyes that, depending on the report, just came right up out of his shoulders. Huge glowing red eyes, large hands, these big wings. And so they saw him and they were like, "Oh my God." And Mothman looked and was like, "Oh my God." And so in the account, on first seeing the other guys, Mothman shuffled off into the factory, just and so they booked it home. They apparently saw it a couple more times, and it was flying. But when it flew, it didn't actually use its wings. It just spread them and then lifted into the air and just went. Apparently, some of them heard the sound of wings flapping, but they saw that they were not. And so then Mothman became kind of a local legend that was supposedly sighted a few times around Point Pleasant. In Point Pleasant, they actually have a Mothman museum. This is the statue just outside of the Mothman Museum. This illustration here I really like because it kind of reflects that original like eyes just right in his shoulders look. And then it's also, this is the Silver Bridge, which is in Point Pleasant, which crashed, which like collapsed in 1967, killed like 42 people. And some people say that the sightings of Mothman were like an omen of the Silver Bridge collapse. And this is Mothman as he appears in Fallout 76, the video game. Next. So another creature from West Virginia is the Grafton Monster. It's this big, it was first seen on June 16, 1964 in Grafton, West Virginia, which was a mining town by this guy, Robert Cockrell, who was going home from his job at the Grafton Sentinel, and he was driving home late at night at 11 o'clock. And as he was driving home, he saw this thing on the side of the road. It was like 7 to 9 feet tall, at least 4 feet wide, like bleached white, with weird, slick skin and no head. And it was just there. And so he got home, and then he realized, wait a minute, I'm a reporter. So he called his buddies to go back there. And they didn't see the monster, but they did see that there on the ground near where he saw it, the grass was stomped down, like there was some huge thing that was there, but there weren't any other tracks. It was like it was there, and then it just wasn't. There have been a number of, there was one guy in particular that Cockrell talked to because nobody really believed him about this big thing that was there and then it wasn't. But there was one conspiracy theorist dude that Cockrell got in touch with who suggested that the Grafton Monster may have been of alien origin, as in, because allegedly when the guys went back to investigate, they heard a weird whistling sound from down at the river, and this UFO specialist guy suggested that the whistling sound was the aliens who dropped the beast off here, picking it back up and getting back out in their spaceship. Cool thing to think about.
So, going to the other side of the pond, headed over to England, to Essex more specifically, where this legend takes place. It's technically the story of John Hyder, which is basically a folk tale in order to make people do good things. The long and short of it, though, is there are these things in the story called the Hyder sprites, which are a huge focal point in a lot of the folk tales of England. The big point is, as you can see in the top picture on the left, they can turn into sort of sparrow-like birds when they just don't want to be noticed, really. But they really, really, really hate cheats. So John Hyder was an honest man, made his work, living, etc., and then he got screwed over by a guy who robbed him and basically left him for dead in town. John Hyder didn't do what anyone else would do and actually just worked off the debt and sort of just did everything and carried on with his life. The Hyder sprites loved him for this. Like, they freaked out about this guy. And so Mr., I can't remember his name in particular, but the guy who robbed him shows up as he's going home along the road, and there's a big puddle, and he's taunting him, saying, "I have all your money, ha ha ha," etc. John Hyder just kind of walks on. And then this dude's like, "What the heck? Why are you not mad?" So then the Hyder sprites came out of the ground, dragged this guy into the puddle, drowned him in the mud, ate his carcass alive, and then left all the gold for John Hyder. So don't cheat people, because you get eaten alive by birds. That's the long and short of it.
Fairy birds.
Yes, fairy birds, who are also people. And don't drown them, because then you just die on the spot. It takes your soul. So now getting into urban legends. Oh, thank you. Yep. So, Jack the Ripper, simple one. most people are familiar with this. He was a killer in Victorian England. Still don't know any of his identity. We don't know what his profession was, don't know anything about it. All we know is there were a string of homicides in the bad end, the east end of London. And basically he would get a bunch of whores, slit their throats and take out all their innards and leave them for dead on the sidewalk. And no one knows why or how or anything, because the bodies hadn't been moved and it was just done in the middle of the street. And nobody ever saw this guy. So he became sort of a legendary status. It's claimed he committed suicide after around a year, but we have no information on this dude. And people still blame certain things on him today.
Okay, so these are the three different myths or urban legends of the story of Croxby. If you could go to the next slide, I just have pictures. So the myth is about a guy who worked in a mental or disability kind of facility, and at night he would escape and kind of just hang out in the woods and stuff, and when kids would go by he would grab them and do all sorts of things that I shall not mention, but we pretty sure we know what that means. They made but there's different kind of myths about it. One was that he worked there at the facility, which is this guy who actually got arrested, and his sentence ends 2037. And during the time, this was the missing kids and stuff. They made a movie about it, but in the movie they changed it to he was homeless, and he lived in an abandoned school that was once a school for disabled kids. And if you hang around that school or hang around that abandoned building, then Croxby will come out. And yeah, I think that's it. So here's Charlie No Face. Charlie No Face is also an urban legend. When he was a kid, him and his friends were hanging out, and they dared him to climb up to the top and try to touch the electric pole. And he did, and he obviously got electrocuted. And when he got electrocuted, when he went to the hospital, he kind of had this greenish tint to him. But this is his face, and he doesn't have eyes, but he had a nose, and then his mouth looks kind of weird. But he was afraid to go out in the daytime because people would make fun of him. So he would go out at night, and his face would kind of glow up in the dark. And people, it was just kind of a myth to say oh, don't be out past your bedtime, come home when the street lights come on, kind of thing. So, yeah.
And now we get to the fun stuff.
Yeah. So this is the simulation argument. Although terrifying or hard to believe, the simulation argument has come more into question and discussion recently. Yeah. People like Elon Musk, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and Rick and Morty have discussed this on big platforms. Elon Musk, most specifically, which I'll be talking about, he did it at the Code Conference. He says there's a 1 in a billion chance we are living in a base reality, which is here, go to the next slide. So, Nick Bostrom published a paper. This is hard to understand. So basically, we are at the point, 40 years ago we had Pong, which was a line and two lines and a dot. And now 40 years later we have 3-dimensional video games where we are playing with millions of players at the same time, and it's all getting better each year. So if you assume that technology will still progress, even at a slower rate than now, eventually we will be able to create simulations that are no different than our actual life. And remember, 2,000 years ago, we used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe, and that's what everyone agreed. So essentially, we're either the base reality and civilization will end, or we will create simulations which suggest that we are in a simulation ourselves. And like Elon Musk says in the next slide, either we'll create simulations that are indistinguishable from reality, or civilization will cease to exist. So yeah, look at him. He looks so happy to tell you.
And then quick fire through a couple of these. Basilisk.
Yeah, basilisk is a snake, and if you look at it, I think you turn into stone. Cool. Hippogriff is a eagle with the front legs of an eagle and the head of an eagle, but the back is of a horse and the tail is of a horse. And I just thought that was kind of cool. They told me it was from Harry Potter, I guess, whatever, I don't know.
Almost from Harry Potter.
Almost from Harry Potter. Almost.
So, dragons, obviously they're dragons, but I focus mainly on the English one because that's where my research took me. They're actually fairly docile, they just like shiny things, because they were kind of like birds. And they were super stupid, and one of them, it's the winged dragon of the north as it's known, they killed by rolling rocks on top of its head while it was awake. It just took it and died. The other, they drowned in a hole, and that was it.